honestly, as long as we've moved to Denver and been married and starting life here and everything, we've been discussing the potential of the Lord calling us somewhere else. And it just became more apparent when I stopped working. Well, I probably, in some senses, when we bought our house, because we really need the Airbnb. We need to like rent out the basement of the house to be able to stay in a house like the house we're in right now.
Which is by no means a mansion.
No.
We live in about 1,100 square feet. Maybe not even that, honestly. Up
Not
here.
even that upstairs, yeah.
1,000 square feet.
We want a lot of kids, all this sort of stuff. And so it became more apparent when we were like looking for houses and everything. And the only houses that we could afford that were full houses, you know, were really far away from my parents, not best areas of town, all that kind of stuff. And so, yeah, so we were kind of talking about moving then and then just kind of being open to it. I have definitely taken the longest time to be open to it because I grew up in Denver and love this community. And I've always kind of envisioned my kids in this community. But more and more that I have opened up to other possibilities, it has just become apparent that that is the best thing for us to do, especially just for the future of our family. And like, that's the biggest thing too. And I always say this is like, we don't need like a huge house, but we do need like space for the kids that we hope to have.
Yeah.
Lord willing. In our house right now, we don't want kids in the basement. We don't know all those different things, you know, whatever.
Yeah, it's essentially 3 real bedrooms.
Yeah. 3 real bedrooms of the house, and one of them is in the basement. Yeah. Which is a walkout basement.
Yeah.
Which makes me nervous, you know, just doors and kids and all that kind of. Anyways, so that's like a very practical thing with like our current situation of we need to be in a different house. And it's not the best place to move to right now or like to move around. Denver is very expensive. If anybody's looking to move here, just keep that in mind.
Yeah.
So it took a long time for me to get there. We had a lot of interesting conversations because I had on my heart the place if we were to move where I wanted to move. I was pretty like stuck on that. And you kind of didn't want to move to that place specifically at the time. This is also going to cut into also our like marriage like discussions, I feel like, that we were talking about today. Today. But we kind of ended up coming to like a good like not even compromise. You know, like when I say compromise, I know you and I have talked about this before because we know we need to move. Like we're not compromising on
moving.
Does that make sense? Like for a while I was like, okay, well I'm compromising on moving. Then Nathan needs to compromise on the space we're moving or like the town we're moving.
Can you expand on that a little bit? So I think that was a big shift.
That was
that was important in our marriage.
Yeah. In my mind, I was like, okay, I'm making a compromise. Like we have the option to stay and we have the option to go. I don't want to go. Right? I don't want to go. And so if I'm okay with going, I'm making a compromise. Right? That's kind of what I was thinking. But then I had to.
And it was like, well, you get to pick the place.
Yeah, because I get to pick the place.
Because I get to choose over leaving.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Instead, I came to the, realization that we need to move, that it would be best for our family.
And understanding that I don't want to necessarily move either.
Yeah, we love Denver. We love our friends. We love our community.
Can't wait to get out of here.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, there's aspects of that.
Yeah.
But it's not like wholeheartedly the easiest thing in the world. This place is horrible.
Yeah.
You don't have no friends here.
Absolutely.
So that's not what it is either. Yeah. So I think that was a big part of you understanding my perspective and us just both getting on the same page of the reality of where things are at.
Yeah. So yeah, once I realized that, it was interesting. Like once I realized that, you started coming around more on the location. I kind of feel like at the same time, or around the same time, it was really interesting how you were.
That is very relevant to our communication.
It was almost like you needed to know that I understood the like meaning behind moving, and it wasn't just you forcing me to do something kind of thing, Yeah. I think you're forcing me, or like, it was like you trying to convince me it was something that I knew we needed to do. And then around the same time, you were kind of seeing that you were kind of more open to the other options, which you originally seemed very closed off to. So yeah, in the end, that's kind of like we've ended up deciding we're for sure going to be moving in 2025.
Yep.
At some point. We'll fit it at some point.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think that's definitely right.
Do you have anything else you want to say? Do you want to say where we're going?
Yeah, are you keeping that a secret? I have more that I want to share about the decision-making process, but I want to see if you, or do you want to...
I'm open to whatever.
Do you want to hold it off?
No, you can say it. You want to say it?
So yeah, so our plan is to move to Kansas City, Missouri
Woo.
in 2025.
Yep.
Date TBD. But yeah, I think that's very exciting. I think the journey for you understanding that aspect was really big for me. But I also just want to talk about, because you shared with the family aspect. And this is something that I almost went into in the podcast episode, but I felt like we should share it together.
Yeah.
But I almost talked about it a little bit just towards the tail end of my last week's episode, where I talked about just how excited I am for the next 4 years and just making the most of them. And that's really my encouragement. Is PVD's encouragement, my boy Patrick Bet David, who I love, is just to make the most of this time. And we've always said that if things change and we want to come back here, we can. But I think at this point in a career, and this is especially for the young men out there, your 20s and then you're like 30 to 35, 30 to 40 range are the most important for the foundation that you're going to set for the income you're going to make. Because your real money making years are your 40s and 50s, right? Like that's when things should be really compounding, things should be set up. You're talking about like senior level, like VP status, like getting into some like big promotions and your career hopefully being in a really, really rock solid place. You know, I think about where I am now as like a Catholic speaker and things like that. Like hopefully it's just a different world in 15 years, right? Of just kind of the standing in that arena. That's one of the arenas that we want to play in,
Yeah.
right?
There's a lot, but
From real estate to investments to just building things, right? Seeking excellence. Obviously my career, whether it's HaThe or, you know, being in sales and becoming a sales manager and hopefully being a VP of sales someday, if that's what, you know, we end up going into or whatever, you know, positions that await. But I think that that's what's so important. And the way that I've described it to a lot of people is that being in Denver, we're just choosing to be in a place where we're playing on hard, you know, like giving kind of video game analogy to it. Like you can play Madden on all Madden or all pro or just like pro, I think was just the kind of regular one that there's rookie level. And like you can go to rookie level if you want to move to like Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? And be like somewhere where it's like really, really cheap to live.
Yeah.
But then I think like pro is being somewhere like Kansas City, Missouri, where it's like things are pretty reasonable, where you can buy a house for like $300,000, $350,000. It's a nice home that you could raise like 2 to 3 kids in, right?
Right.
Very
Comfortably.
comfortably. Yeah. And you can get to 5 probably if you're
Yeah.
willing to be a little bit uncomfortable, maybe, based on like our standards of what we want, but still like be pretty happy in those kinds of a house. Not need $1 million home, right? To have a nice home where you are in Denver, where we're playing on all Madden, the hardest level. Or maybe, you know, the highest end of all pro, or maybe you would say San Francisco is all Madden. But I still think, I always say we're in that next 5 cities where you have like DC, New York City, you know, Los Angeles, San Francisco, maybe Seattle. And then I think like the next grouping is where Denver's in.
For sure.
You know, the Denver, Miami, Austin, right? And so it's like, why live in a place that is just the hardest?
Right.
You know?
And I think a lot of people's pushback on that is like, okay, well, they have roots here, they have community here, they have family. And that was something that's definitely, you know, like I said, was hard to kind of think about because all those things have been so impactful for us
Certainly
over these last few years. But just this trust that the Lord will provide as we move forward. And
well,
the big pull to Denver, the big pull to Kansas City is my sister's there. Now it's Benedictine, and my, you know, a lot of friends are still there. Your mom, will come along, all that kind of stuff. So
we have family there.
Yeah, that was like the definite biggest pull.
We
have friends,
family, and like existing friends there already, and roots and stuff. And so that's been really helpful. But I think also for us, not only family, this is something that's really big too. Is obviously we'll have grandparents present there, but also our kids. And that was one of the most convincing things when you came upon that. So you can share a little bit about that, and then I'll share from my perspective.
Yeah, I was sharing with an older mom here. She has her oldest kids are in high school, middle school. And I was kind of sharing with her just kind of this discernment that we were going through. And when I said it, she said, you know, that's something me and my husband have been talking about because we're set in Denver. We have a house, you know, we've planted our roots, all this different kind of stuff. But now we're starting to see that our kids might not even be able to afford living here someday. And then they might be in some of the situations that, you know, a lot of our friends are in, or a lot of families that we know are in, where the kids, you know, wants to be close to grandparents. And this is where all the roots are laid down and everything like that. But they can't afford it, you know? And I thought that was really interesting to hear from her perspective, now being a little older and being like, okay, we have a house, you know, we are settled, we're fine. But what are our kids going to do? Because it's only going to get worse in some of these, you know, especially in Denver where it's booming and it's just growing so much. And so that was really interesting and kind of funny. I think like 2 or 3 people have said the same thing since we talked about that
Mhm.
encounter, which is really, really interesting. And that's kind of what we, settled on. You had talked to another guy who said his kids went to Benedict and he was telling his kids to stay in Kansas City because it was
Yeah, it's so much cheaper.
cheaper. Yeah. And so just really interesting to think about that for the next generation too. And obviously, and to me, one of the other places we were talking about was Dallas, Texas. So anybody who's in Dallas that's hearing this, I'm sorry. We didn't choose your city.
You're a runner-up.
You're a runner up. Maybe if we don't like Kansas City.
Yeah,
To me, some of those places, I feel like where they are really growing, like Denver, might become like Denver quicker than it seems Kansas City might. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Um, and when I think of like generationally, like wanting our kids to be able to live somewhere that's close to us that they can afford, that's
yeah.
cool and everything like that. That was definitely a deal breaker for sure.
Yeah, my other thing with that is not only the future of the kids from what they can afford, but also our just wanting to help our kids,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
College is only going to get more expensive.
Yeah.
If you looked at one of the things we did when we were considering this was we just looked at high school prices.
My gosh.
Do you remember that one night?
When we didn't even know what tuition was in high school, and we would like to homeschool, so we were
We're not worried about grades,
not worried about grades.
but we only want to homeschool till high school.
Yeah.
And so when you look at high school prices, and I'm talking your standard Catholic high school, and I mean when we looked in Denver, it was literally $10,000 to $30,000 a year per kid. And so if you're talking about having 6 kids, 5 or 6 kids, and you want to live in a place like this where you have to have $1 million house in order to have the type of house that we'd like to have,
Yeah.
in Denver,
Which isn't crazy. I didn't really like say that. Like,
no,
like a crazy house. Just go on Zillow and look at
there were
it.
mediocre houses selling for $750,000
Yeah.
in Denver.
You should see this house on the end of our street that is just like, the rooms are tiny, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's going for what?
It's 4 bedrooms, 3 upstairs, 1 downstairs. They listed it for like $920. It's maybe 3,100 square feet, 3,200 square feet. Weird layout upstairs.
No, but there's no like upper level.
No, it's just a 2-story house with all the bedrooms on the main floor, and then there's a basement. It's beautiful and redone.
Oh, it's
really nice.
beautiful. Yeah.
Listed for $900 and some thousand. It's just insane. I mean,
It's crazy.
it's crazy.
That's what I mean.
And I
Like,
still live in a
for people
place
who don't live in Denver, though.
yeah,
like,
blocks away from where homeless are roaming the streets and rundown motels, and we don't live in the bougie suburbs by any means. And so just to give people context, like there's people everywhere because prices have gone up so much for the last 5 years. Even in Kansas City, if you look at 10 years ago versus now, it seems like it's so expensive. You talk to people from like Cincinnati, friends in Cincinnati, they're like, oh yeah, no, I get it. It's like, no, you haven't looked at Zillow in these places where we're talking about, because you really don't understand that I'm telling you that if you don't have $600,000 as your budget to start, you will not find a home in a place that is not Aurora.
Yeah.
And Aurora, mind you, is where the migrants were taking over apartment buildings, like the Venezuelans. Like that's what Aurora is. And so if you don't have that as $600,000 as your starting price, then you're not getting a decent home outside of Aurora.
Right.
And really, if you're talking Littleton or some of the suburbs, and that we'd really like to live in, you're talking $700 as your starting price, and that was 2 years ago. And so if interest rates are coming back down and we want to move, like you're talking $750, $800 as your starting price in a place that we can't Airbnb, which we just can't swing unless we live house for.
Yeah.
And we can't afford anything else. And so that's where, for me, it's like if I can move in half my mortgage, where you're talking bringing it down to where we have some extra income that we can invest. So we can invest into real estate, or that we can invest into businesses or other things that we're trying to do. That frees us up to where paying for high school, we can still go on vacation when we have kids in high school. Because people aren't realizing like that's what you're talking about. Is you're talking about like living in Denver, and we don't ski, we don't do anything local, we don't camp. And so it's like we can't, like you're talking about no vacations once kids start high school.
Right.
You have 6 kids, you have $1 million house, your mortgage is $6,000 a month, $10,000 a month. Like these are this is what I'm talking about. Like you're talking about paying $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 a month, unless how do you even come up with 10% down on $1 million home? You have $100,000 sitting aside, maybe with the equity in our current house, but then what's $900,000 in a bank loan? You're talking about paying $6,500, $7,500 a month. That's increasing over time because taxes in Colorado just keep going up because we got to pay for all the free things for migrants. You don't go on vacation with your kid at all, right? And then you're talking about, now I have to pay $1,000. I got 2 kids in high school, $1,000 a year. Kids are going to college. Oh, I can't help you at all because I got to pay, my base minimum expenses on my house and, education for my children is $10,000 a month, 15 years from now. Think about that. $10,000, that's $120,000. So even if I'm making $250,000 a year, after taxes, you're still talking about barely living on anything after just high school tuition and your mortgage.
Right.
And then what's food going to be at that point? Food's already $1,000 a month for us almost.
Right.
And so thinking about that, like that's the kind of stuff that people have to be thinking about when people look at this. It's truly, I think that we're blessed to have vision to be thinking about 10, 20 years from now more than a lot of people are. But man, if you don't have family who's like literally giving you money or helping you to buy a house or doing some of these things, I think it's imprudent for a lot of people that aren't making a lot of money to try to stay here. And I know that a lot of people do it and they like it. They like the community and all that stuff. We are trying to be in a place where we have a lot of, I've always felt since I went to the Dominican Republic for the first time, I felt like I needed to create a lot of excess to be able to help people who don't have this opportunity, whether they be in third world countries or in the inner city or whatever. And like, that's my dream and my vision is to be able to help meeting people when we're older, we're going around, we're speaking, we're doing different things that we can just bless people and help them because we had an opportunity. I don't feel that it's right and this doesn't mean that everybody needs to leave Denver, but for me and our calling, to me, it's not right for me to stay in a place just for fun that's twice as expensive as other places when I could go somewhere else, even just for 4, 5, 6 years, 10 years, and really grind and make the most of it and have more opportunity and have more cushion to be able to invest and do things that multiply and be a good steward, that then I can go and be more helpful with homelessness, helping people with drug addiction, helping people with their tuition. I'd love to pay for other kids to go to college or not college, but even Catholic schooling, right? We meet families through sports and stuff like that, single mothers and hard times or whatever, and be able to help pay for them to go to Catholic school.
The Lord called us to it, like adoption.
Yes, I want to be able to do those things and not just live in a $1 million house that should be $400,000 just because I want to be, have 300 days of sun a year.
Yeah.
Even though I love it.
Even though we love it. And that's the hard part. I do tear up, but even when you brought this up, I kind of was starting to like choke back some tears.
Mm-hmm.
Just like the thought of it is really hard. But I kind of have gotten to the same place too, where I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't think I can like justify staying